All right, this is our special guest, and I guess those of you watching on Guy's channel, I'm his special guest. We're here to talk about the 49ers rebuild and maybe a first look at the roster. There we go. Depth chart roster. I'll reveal that in a little bit. You can check out the comment section of the chat. I put the link in there if you want to follow along. Guy, long time no talk. How's it going?
It's going good, David. It's good to see you, man. I know. You know what feels good to me? I've noticed it this week, like starting Monday, is the 2025, turning my attention to the 2025 football season, because the 2024 football season was.
Well, I sense the same from 49ers fans.
Yeah.
They had accepted that the season was over after the Rams game in general. So the last 3 weeks, like nobody's watching any shows. The people who are just kind of super morose about things. There's this lethargic energy. And then all of a sudden the season ends. Brian Schneider is fired. They moved Nick Sorensen out of the defensive coordinator role, and everybody's fired up. It almost feels like they're going to play the Jets in week 1 on Sunday right now. People need to pump the brakes, I think, because now you have, 9 months to wait. So it's going to be a while before the 49ers take the field in an actual game again. But it's been weird because normally people are exhausted at this point. And, at the point where the season ends. So usually this point is 3 or 4 weeks away from now. But people are exhausted. They're heartbroken because the 49ers have lost all these games. But now they're energized at the end of the season. And I think they want another season. But there's a lot of work to do before that can happen.
I sense one energizing factor is the schedule for next year, right? And the fourth place schedule we know, the crossover games we know, the strength of schedule based on the 2024 records we know is 32nd next year. So that seems to be a motivating factor for people. I think the fact that they are on a coordinator hunt and Robert Saleh's available, which I got to think. Well, I don't know where you want to start, but if you want to start, we can start there.
We should start with the leadership. Yeah, we're going to get into all this for the people at home. This is the 49ers depth chart as it stands right now. We're going to talk about how they're going to build out this team position by position, but I think it's a great idea to start with the leadership.
Can I change my idea?
Go ahead. We're here to audible. You can change the play at the line of scrimmage.
Can. We just watched Penn State Notre Dame on Thursday night. And I was texting with Greg Papa yesterday. He's like, who do you like tonight? And I'm like, 44-11.
Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter.
Yeah, and then watch 59, the right tackle for Notre Dame. And Papa's texting me last night, like, do you think Abdul Carter will be there at 11? And I'm like, I don't think so, man. But he's so explosive and very good. Now, Tyler Warren will be there probably at 11. College football, I know you just love football, but the NFL consumes you. For people who love college football and watch it, and I know you watch it too, you see it. There are a lot of guys who kind of look like Kyle Juszczyk wearing 44 around college football. It is a thing. It's a thing. Like I notice it every week. Some of them are tight ends, some of them are fullbacks, but they're out there. Now Tyler Warren is different. He's 6'6",
and he's 261.
He's 261, yeah.
And he's moving like he's 240, which is what I've seen him play 3 times now, and every single time I've tweeted, Penn State number 44, you are a 49er. And I learned his name yesterday. This is how I watch and I look at numbers. Like you just went 11, 44, 59, right? Now I'm starting to learn the names because now the 49er season is over. And I'm not just watching these games on silent copy. I went to the Penn State bar, by the way, in the marina last night, Monahan.
Which is what? Oh,
yeah,
Monahan's Penn State bar?
It was crazy. I will find the video of one of the touchdowns and we'll play it here in a second. But I didn't put it up online yesterday because they ended up losing. But Penn State fans would have.
I guess bus stop was empty then. Georgia bar.
Yeah, that is the Georgia bar. That's right. Yeah, bus stop was empty. And I think that the Notre Dame bar is the Irish Times downtown, but we didn't want to go downtown. So I was showing my cousin around. He's coming in from Bakersfield, and he was amazed. He's like, there's this many Penn State fans on the West Coast? And it's packed. It was cool. It looked like they were going to win that game, and then they threw that terrible pick.
Yeah.
But anyway, 44.
So my question.
Go ahead.
No, he's been one of the stories of college football this year because Penn State hired a new offensive coordinator. They hired Kansas's offensive coordinator this last season. His name's Andy Koltnicki, and he's extremely creative. Anyone who's watched Penn State saw them run double passes. They put Tyler Warren as an eligible tackle and, lined him up at left tackle, but made him eligible. And they ran that play twice this year at least. And I think they ran it for a touchdown against SC. If you want to go find that play, he makes a really difficult contested catch. So not only is he a good player, but he played for a really creative offensive coordinator who moved him around, who ran all kinds of trick plays. Penn State was just really, really fun to watch. And so the question is, like, if you're the Niners drafting at 11 and you've got all these needs, but you also have a board that rates the players and the best player available is a tight end from Penn State named Tyler Warren, what do you do? Could you use him? Is it malpractice to draft a tight end when you need an offensive tackle, when you need defensive edge, when you need interior defensive lineman, when you need another linebacker? Is it malpractice to take a tight end?
First
you
thing
just
I would
played
say
Brandon Ayuk.
Is
you're probably gonna give George Kittle more money.
I first noticed 44 Tyler Warren lined up out wide.
Yeah,
I didn't notice him as a tight end at first because they line him up out wide so often. Then he's at this H-back spot, and then he's in the slot. Then he's an inline tight end. And that was what really stood out to me, is that he's 260 and he's out wide. I get it that's tougher to do in the NFL, but that also is the 49ers forte. And now the whole league is doing stuff like that. But it started with not just Juszczyk. Obviously, we look at 44 and 44 Tyler Warren, but guys like Kittle, guys like Deebo Samuel, McCaffrey, obviously, they're amorphous offensively. They're putting guys everywhere out on the field. I think that's a hallmark of the system. Second thing is that tight end 2 is also a glaring need for the 49ers. I think that the lack of one that has been to be a legitimate counter threat to Kittle has held back this offense. So you could argue that it obviously isn't as big of a need as some of those other spots, but it definitely is a need. Then we can get into the whole debate about, okay, do they go best player available regardless of where they are in the draft? Or yesterday, Tim Kawakami and I on the San Francisco Standards live room, we debated a bit about this. He thinks best player available, he agrees with me, is the way to go throughout most of the draft, but he thinks that there should be an exception made early in this draft because he sees the need at offensive tackle for future building purposes as well to be so great. So is 11 a high enough pick to budge out of the best player available strategy? Do you feel confident enough at 11 when you're on the clock that that is a valuable enough pick that you have a surefire prospect? I just come from the school of thought, guy, that there are no surefire prospects. So you have to go with your gut and the best guy that you think is up on the board when you are on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one answer. It's so relative. Like, best player available. Well, how much better is he than your need? Is he slightly better than your need or a lot better than your need? But I think, you think back, was it Kyle? Who did Kyle talk to? Maybe it was a conversation with Papa, because he only does the Kawakami interview, he does that interview in the preseason or before, in the offseason. But he made a comment, or maybe it was a press conference, you may remember. He made a comment within the last 2 months that basically was, we were right not to take an offensive lineman in the second round. That, remember last year's draft, there were all these tackles that were kind of in the conversation around the Niners, and they didn't take any of them.
Roger Rosengarten
being one.
Well, they were right to take an offensive lineman in the third round.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that Kyle basically said, like, we didn't like any of them, so we weren't going to take any of them. And and when you watch the guys that we passed on, we were right. Kyle said that in the last 2 months. I don't remember where. And essentially,
RJ Gillen and Tariq Ahmad, the two personnel guys, said the same thing after the draft. Well, they didn't say we were right, but they explained the strategy. They said it's really hard for there to be an offensive tackle that matches what we need to justify using a high pick on him. And nobody matched that for the 49ers last year, given where their first pick was.
The other thing about Tyler Warren, and you can weigh in on, obviously you can weigh in on this, but tight end does block, right?
Yes.
So are you helping your blocking, A, because he is a weapon, B, he frees up your other blocking tight end, George Kittle, C, he blocks himself. I go back to the question again. Is it, especially when you have an offensive head coach, you always are aware, like, are we just drafting toys or are we actually making this team better in a significant way? That's the question I think you answer with a tight end who's a dynamic pass catcher versus a tackle. With all due respect to tackles, they're not toys, right? Like,
yeah, they're not offensive weapons.
Interior defensive linemen, they're not toys. Defensive ends are toys, but like the guys you get, like Abdul Carter's not the ones you get at 11 generally, right? The ones you get at 4, those guys are toys. You move them all over the defense. And so that's where I keep going back to, is like, if you're Kyle Shanahan, I think you're asking your front office and your evaluation people, I just want to make sure we're not just drafting some guy because me, the play caller, would have fun with him, right? Because when you watch Penn State, they had a lot of fun with him. He's got to be the best player that can. He's got to make Brock's life easier. He's got to make Ayuk's life easier. He's got to make Kittle's life easier. And he has to be able to pick up the slack when one of these guys gets hurt or two of them get hurt.
Well, exactly. And they needed more toys this year because with Ayuk out, with Christian McCaffrey out, this team finished dead last in average separation at the time of the catch or at the time of the incompletion. And that hurts your pass protection. So having weapons does inherently, or at least theoretically, help the pass protection because guys get open quicker and then the quarterback can get rid of the ball quicker. So the blocking looks better. So the improving the offensive line itself is not the only way to improve pass protection. But I wrote about this many times this year. I mean, this has been going back for years. I thought that the 49ers have needed to do a little bit better up front. This was a weird year in that they did improve significantly in one part of the offensive line, but then they regressed significantly in another part. The right side was terrible, which made Brock Purdy's awesome year in 2023. I thought all the more impressive because the right side was atrocious in pass protection. They improved that with Purdy. McKivitz actually got better, still slightly below average in pass protection, but people who think McKivitz is the worst tackle in the league just haven't been watching the rest of the league. There's some really, really bad tackle play, and I think that the addition of Purdy really helped Colton on the right side. But where the 49ers truly regressed this year was at center. And Jake Brendel was dealing with knee tendonitis already in the offseason. I think that really contributed to his slide and left guard. And Aaron Banks is going to be a free agent this offseason. And especially against Miami, where Jake Brendel struggled, that was the game where the A-gap pressure forced that interception that essentially ended the game from Brock Purdy. It was Calais Campbell. It was a stunt that Jake Brendel just didn't pick up. It was really, really starkly highlighted to me that the 49ers will need to improve that interior, which generally means veteran signing because centers and rookie and center doesn't go together in Kyle Shanahan's system. Yeah. Yeah. So you look at that, you look at maybe Drew Dahlman is going to be a free agent. There are a couple other names we can all get into that.
Stanford, Michigan was Drew
Stanford. And then that was Drake Nugent. He's on the roster practice squad. Drew Dahlman was Stanford throughout his entire college career. That's Chris Dahlman's son. Chris Dahlman was a center for Steve Young and the 49ers. And back when Drew Dahlman came out of Stanford, before he was drafted by the Falcons, I was able to interview both him and his dad. And it was really neat because they're both cut from the same cloth. And that's the cloth that fits what Shanahan has wanted, really cerebral center, but also center who can move and get those reach blocks executed on the second level. Because Chris Dahlman was back in the Bob McKittrick era, and Bob McKittrick, he was the offensive line coach who really emphasized mobility up front, zone blocking up front. Less zone blocking, more mobility, but that really was melded with what Alex Gibbs did. And Alex Gibbs was the O-line coach that formed the Mike Shanahan lines. So it all comes full circle now, and that the 49ers obviously run a Shanahan system, but a lot of that was influenced by what McKittrick emphasized with the dynastic 49ers, with those athletic linemen. So I think they need somebody like that at center, and it needs to be a veteran. And I think that can make the whole line better. And then the toys that you add elsewhere, maybe a Tyler Warren, that can further improve the pass protection for Purdy.
All right, that's it. January 10th. That's my pick, Tyler Warren.
Did I convince you?
Well, no, I watched him all year, and I just felt guilty liking him in this. Like, oh, this is going to be such a, it's like saying you should draft Ashton Genty at 11. Well, you shouldn't, So I need somebody to come in and, it's good to hear somebody else say that it's a responsible pick, because it just, watching him all year, it felt so irresponsible. Somebody made a comment on the stream that the other thing to say about Tyler Warren is, if you can find an elite player who blocks and catches passes but doesn't play tackle or receiver, he's cheaper than both of those guys, right? Like, somebody made a comment about if you have a 2 or 3. Actually, it's a super chat here, so I don't know if it's a little early for that, but since I started referencing it, we could put it up from Brad.
My comments aren't even open yet. Let me.
Okay.
I'll put it up on the screen.
But there's something to be said for. Brad says, what is a player who gets 2 or 3 contracts and becomes Kittle 2.0, face of the franchise kind of guy worth? It's got to be worth it, just taking a big offensive line body guy available at 11, which made me think, yeah, there is. If you nail if you get a top 3 tight end, it's a cost effective move, also, right?
Yes.
Now you also want the top tackle and you want the best receiver and all that, but second tier receivers get paid like top tier receivers.
Exactly. Kittle has been a top tier receiver, like not just tight end, top tier receiver in terms of the receiving efficiency. They've gotten him for $15 million a year. Just rough math. The top guys are over $30 million a year now, but Kittle is producing in the receiving game at that level. Like, he's over 1,000 yards, despite the fact that he's in the block a lot. So you're spot on. That's a great point, because the cost efficiency down the road for the tight end position is a definite money ball hack in the modern NFL.
I think the guys that we like that people will love, because when you're drafting at 11, you kind of get to you're like, oh yeah, Abdul Carter. If we can move up, I doubt he'll be there. Mason Graham, everyone's going to like the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. He's not going to be there. The best 2 tackles, probably, if there are 2 great tackles, I mean, there's probably 1, are not going to be there. The best 2 receivers are not going to be there, And the unfortunate thing in this draft, it's probably 2 quarterbacks go ahead of 11. It's not one of those 4 QBs in the top 10 drafts unless something changes. So, Travis Hunter's not going to be, like, all the 11 gets you close enough to kind of fall in love, but you don't actually get those guys.
Yeah.
And that's where positionally tight end, you can actually get an elite guy. Maybe. Now, if you told me he goes 9, that wouldn't shock me either. But
that's where McGlinchey went. All right. That was McGlinchey went at 9.
9-10. And Colton.
Yeah.
Colton
well, they were the
10.
worst team in football throughout most of 2017. Then they got Jimmy G and they won all those games. So they didn't have the top pick anymore in 18. They slid down to where they had the coin flip with the Raiders, and they won the coin flip. Rod Woodson was the guy.
Gruden didn't want to show up. Remember, Gruden didn't want to come to that thing.
I was at the coin flip.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was at the.
It was Lynch, right? Lynch and Rod Woodson. Is that what it was?
Yeah. Well, they had Rod Woodson flip it because he played for both teams.
Oh.
But mainly more with the Raiders. But yeah. But anyway, he flipped it, and I think it was. Tails was 49ers and heads was Raiders, and the 49ers won. And because of that, they got McGlinchey. Congratulations. McGlinchey, who got him a comp pick after he left. The thing about McGlinchey was he was a great run blocker. And this guy from Notre Dame, 59, Emil Wagner, we were watching him yesterday. You said before he went on air, you reminded you of McGlinchey. I looked up his measurements, and 6'6", 290. So he's light, he's tall. And then Abdul Carter got him pretty good on that one. That was an amazing sack from Carter. It seemed like he was getting held by Wagner, and then he drags the quarterback down with his left arm. I think that's the play where Carter went viral yesterday. But still, McGlinchey had a lot to work on regarding pass protection, but the 49ers like the run blocking, and I think a lot of fans want to see a little bit more rigidity in pass protection from right tackle, if you can get it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where this guy projects right now, but as you said, athletically, he's, he was a high school power forward who's one of these guys who had to put on a lot protein shakes and put on 50 pounds, put on a bunch of weight. And, but when you watch, you just go, there's not many people walking the earth that look like 59 for Notre Dame, Emil Wagner. But I'm not sure. I don't know where he projects in this draft. He could be a guy that comes back to school and puts himself in the top 5. I don't know.
So you said protein shakes and stuff like that. So this reminded me of Ben Barch, who is going to be a free agent, but he played a good game and a half for the 49ers, a left guard, before he suffered a high ankle sprain. I'm going to get back to the protein shakes here in a second. But get
this super chat off the screen.
Yeah, I will, because I was reading it one more time.
Oh, okay.
Take it off. I'm just looking at it really quickly. This is going to relate to that as well. I think that the best way for the 49ers forward, and a lot of people might disagree, you might disagree, but unless there's a tackle that they absolutely love at 11, I think that the best way to improve the pass protection and the offense in general is to sign a good center. I think that makes everybody better. I think that's a rising tide that lifts all boats. And then solve that left guard position in a similar way that you solved right guard last year with Dominic Puni. You could draft somebody in the second, third round, somewhere in the middle rounds that might fit. They don't necessarily have to be good as quickly as Puni was good, though, because Barch might be a short-term answer for the 49ers. He was rock solid over the course of his, 5-6 quarters before he hurt his ankle. And Ben Barch, the reason I'm bringing this back to protein shakes is this was the famous smoothie that allowed an offensive lineman to gain weight. Listen to this. This was when he was coming out of college at St. John's in Minnesota. Or this was during college at St. John's in Minnesota. In order to gain weight, Barch consumed a protein shake daily consisting of 7 scrambled eggs, a tub of cottage cheese, quick grits, peanut butter, bananas, and Gatorade, growing from 240 pounds to 275 pounds in just one summer. He eventually reached 308 pounds with this method. How can you not like this guy for at least being in a bridge left guard for the 49ers? I mean, cottage cheese and 7 eggs in one protein shake. He's a football guy.
That's commitment. Yeah, that's commitment.
Yeah, there's commitment. Really good guy too, and he watches the channel, by the way. So maybe Ben Barch is watching right now, and he's smiling at home in appreciation. But
it's 9:06 a.m., so he's on his 3rd bucket of cottage cheese.
Just watching. Just watching.
Cottage cheese is what I can go like cottage cheese. You can get tired of cottage cheese real fast. So if that's mental. That is mental toughness.
Yeah, and he's a guy that's been waiting his chance. And the reason though I'm getting into the weeds right here, let's show people the depth chart really fast. The reason I'm getting into these weeds is this is how you have to build an NFL roster. You're not, as we're illustrating right now, it's going to be hard to get the A-list guys, even if you have a higher draft pick than normal. Plus, you only have one of those draft picks in the first round. Then there are salary cap constraints. So you have to find these diamonds in the rough. Barch is currently not under contract for 2025, but I think he's a player that the 49ers would be really interested in bringing back. This is what it looks like right now out of the players who are under contract. I'm zooming in on the offensive line. I mean, I need to get wait. This is 2024. Sorry, let's get 2025 up here. I was looking. That was how 2024 ended. And oops, took you off the screen, guy. My bad. There you go. Let's get the 2025 sheet open. Okay, this is what it looks like for 2025. Injury shadings are in red, but you've got 2 tackles on the roster right now that I project to make the 53. These are the guys that are supplemental guys that I don't project to make the 53. So you still have to spruce this up. You have a couple guards. Nick Zakelj made some strides. Spencer Burford, I thought, looked better this year, but we didn't see all too much of him. And then he had to play left tackle at the end. And then you have the center situation, which needs to be fixed. There's Puni. I think Burford and Zakelj, I'm still not convinced, though, are starting level solutions for the 49ers to move this line forward. Somebody like Ben Barch might be. And then you toss in a mid-round draft pick, try to replicate the same success that you got with Dominic Pooney last year, all of a sudden you're dealing with a much more robust line, especially if you pair it with a veteran signing at center. So that would be my formula moving forward on that offensive line.
I think it's pretty consistent with Kyle Shanahan's history, right? Which is unless, and you said it about the draft, it applies in free agency too, unless they will spend for who they believe is elite, and anything in between, they kind of feel like we can draft later or develop or not pay a premium for, and the offense and the scheme will elevate offensive line play.
I have the video of Tariq Ahmad and RJ Gillen talking about the offensive line right after the draft last year. This is about the premium level that they're looking at from tackles. Let's have a listen.
Yeah, good question. I think there's not a lot of people that have the skill set to play tackle, so it reduces the pool, and also they typically go pretty early. So there's obviously a lot that we like early on in the draft, but then we are very selective of those guys. But it is something we would love to take throughout the draft if the right person was available.
There you go. So we'll see who's available at 11. A lot of this draft prognostication, it's a lot of, there's people blowing hot air for a few months because we don't actually know what it's going to look like at number 11. It's a very, it's like trying to predict the exact score drive by drive of a football game 4 months before it happens. It's impossible to do that 2 minutes before it happens. The game actually has to start, and then you have to think on your feet, and you have to see, guys are going to slide, other guys are going to go higher than you expect them to. But in general, it's really hard for the 49ers to, and this year should be easier mathematically, at least the chances are higher. But it is hard to envision a tackle that they're really going to like to be at that spot. And we'll see if it shakes out that way this season.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And, the beauty of the college football playoff being more teams now is if you're drafting high, if you're drafting in the late 20s, it's harder. But if you're drafting high, you get to just watch all these guys play each other. Like last night and tonight, there'll be another. But as I see it, I'm just looking at a draft list here, so I'm just going to count it out with you, David. Guaranteed players to get drafted ahead of the 49ers. And obviously, you're right. Like somebody could have some video of them, although hitting a gravity bong now doesn't have the same effect it once did on Laramie Tunsil's draft stats or whatever that was.
That worked out for the Texans.
Was that a gravity bong or whatever that thing was?
Gas mask.
Gas mask,
yeah.
So Travis Hunter won. I think Abdul Carter is going to go ahead of 11. Mason Graham from Michigan will go ahead. That's 3. I think Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU, that's 4. I think Cam Ward, 6, the quarterback from Miami, and Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback from Colorado, 7. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Maybe Tetairoa McMillan, the receiver from Arizona. He could. I mean, right now I'll say yes, he goes ahead of 11. So that's 8, which feels like too many players to say are guaranteed to go ahead of 11. So it's probably not accurate. Maybe some quarterback blows up, but yeah, that's where I would put it right now. I'd say 7 or 8 guys are definitely going ahead. So I don't know if that's good or bad, because those are definitely guys at positions you would like. But what I listed there was not a bunch of guys at the same position, which means maybe you do have a shot at the best tight end or the second best defensive. Probably not the third best defensive lineman, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a headline there other than I'm just looking at this draft board, kind of thinking it through based on what I've seen in college football this year. So we'll see.
Well, not to stir the pot, but the last time the 49ers held a pick this high, they traded up to number 3. And they shocked everybody, right, with that move. And that's when they ultimately got Trey Lance. And not going to do that this time. They one thing that I really took from the press conference the other day was just how open they were about how Brock Purdy is their guy. Like we all knew this, but I think it's really interesting that the 49ers are putting on the full court positive press while Brock Purdy's doing the same thing, saying, almost hinting that he wants this done before the phase 1 of the offseason program. I think that the style of communication here is really important, because the style of communication last year when they're trying to get something done with Brandon Ayuk was not reminiscent of what we're hearing right now from both the 49ers and from Brock Purdy. And that means that something can get done sooner rather than later if both parties are this gung-ho about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, people, I've had a few people over the course of the season, I'm sure you have had this too, say, I don't want to hear the word leverage ever again after watching the Ayuk thing play out. The leverage, there was leverage in different ways in the Ayuk situation. This situation is different, right? The leverage for Brock is that he plays quarterback. The leverage that Ayuk has that Brock didn't have is that Ayuk was already a multimillionaire by the time he arrived at this negotiation. And Brock has not been making first-round money in the way that Ayuk was, right? So I think that's a check on the 49ers side. And I know there's this argument that, well, his agent's going to say, well, you've been getting him cheap all this time. Now it's time to make up the difference. I think that's a weak argument and a bad argument. That's not the way this stuff works.
No.
And I think the real human fact is that $60 million a year sounds amazing. And I know we don't need to get into AAV and all that right now, but just speaking generally, right? Like,
yeah, it's a good parameter to.
Purdy also changes his life in a way that a guy who's making $15 million, 40 would change his life also. But the guy that's already made, let's say $15 million, goes, you know what? I can play a little more hardball here. So I think this is probably going to result in a resolution that's not that dramatic, that changes the Purdy family's life forever, and that the 49ers could pivot in 3 years if they wanted to. That's generally how these deals have gone for them.
Well, that's how every deal ever has gone, right? Deshaun Watson's, and by the way, he tore his Achilles again. That news just came through a few minutes ago. I'm not kidding. Mike just sent me breaking news. Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson ruptured his Achilles again. Further testing showed, and he had another surgery on Thursday to repair it.
That's good for the Browns, right? There's got to be some insurance.
Yeah, I would hope they bought insurance, because that contract remains absolutely ridiculous. $230 million fully guaranteed, and it did not set precedent because the rest of the league said this is so ridiculous. The rest of the league's agents said this is so ridiculous. We're just going to ignore how bad this contract is and operate with number 2 being the top spot to set precedent for other contracts. But that's the only contract. This is my point with the eject button after 2 or 3 years. It's the only contract where there really isn't an eject button. It's just a bunch of years and a bunch of fully guaranteed money. But essentially every other NFL contract has a couple years up to 3 years of fully guaranteed money, and then there's the eject. And so if the 49ers execute what you say they will with Brock Purdy, that's par for the course in this league. There's a lot of power on the side of teams in this league. Now, the position group that has most successfully moved the ball closer to their court is the quarterback position, because it's so important. But I still don't see Brock Purdy being able to walk away with 4 or 5 years of fully guaranteed money, because that Watson contract is not precedent. And what's happening right now, 2 Achilles tears, plus the really bad play from Watson before the Achilles tear, shows you why you shouldn't commit that kind of money and that kind of guaranteed money to any player in the NFL.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, the market's the market at the quarterback position. And the 49ers have – Jed York came out at the owners' meetings in Orlando last year and said what I just said. The market's the market. We're ready to pay what we need to pay. And just the cost of doing business. Everybody here is going to be talking about APY. That's not going to matter in the big picture unless it's all fully guaranteed, like the Watson deal, which it won't be, because there's going to be funny money. So if anybody needs their ego stroked, they can tack on money that doesn't count at the end of the deal. I don't think Brock Purdy will need his ego stroked. I don't think his agent will need his ego stroked. That's Kyle Strongen. I've talked to him a little bit, but it's one of those things where the structure of the deal is going to be what determines whether or not the 49ers can continue to operate and build a team around Brock Purdy. And they need to find a good structure. And that's something the 49ers have actually proven to be really good at over the course of the years. Even with the Ayuk deal, which was expensive, they found a structure that kept those salary cap hits low for the first couple years.
I think Brock is pretty well set up to have I expect him to have a bounce back year. That's my expectation. I wasn't that, I didn't read much into the way that they talked about him this week. As long as he's healthy, there's really nothing else to do in this offseason, right? There's no Rodgers, there's no Cousins. And you pay him. You find a middle ground, you pay him, and you move on. There's just
don't speak so soon. There will be Cousins available probably, and it will cause people to make videos about it. But
yeah, no, I know. What I mean is, if Brock is healthy, you don't pivot to Cousins.
I fully agree. I was being but it's the most annoying subplot every other offseason, right? Kirk Cousins is available. People Photoshop.
It doesn't annoy me.
Cousins. You love that kind of stuff. You kind of love the chaos.
I do kind of enjoy it. Okay. Do you want to talk about let's talk about Robert Saleh for a second.
Yeah.
Is he too obvious of a candidate at defensive? The Niners interviewed him.
Yeah. They interviewed him. They interviewed Deshae Townsend from the Lions, who is part of the Aaron Glenn defense that blitzed the hell out of the Vikings and was able to overcome its deficiencies on the injury front to win that huge game. I think the 49ers are really interested in blitzing more and finding ways to mask some of their deficiencies. It's funny because Saleh didn't blitz a whole lot with the 49ers, although the 2020 season is the reason I think they should be interested in Robert Saleh, and they are. Not the 2019 season. I mean, 2019 is great. They were a dominant defense that year, but look at what Saleh did in 2020. I thought that was his most impressive body of work. He lost Bosa in week 2. He did start blitzing a lot more. He did, and he was able to basically mask to a great extent, not to a full extent, but he was able to mask so many injury deficiencies 49ers had that year. They finished the season ranked number 6 in EPA and DVOA defensively in 2020, which is, when you look at what happened this year, they fell down to number 26.
Yep.
And the injuries were not as severe this year.
They were 10th last year. They were 10th last year.
And they were 10th last year. But the number 6 in 2020, despite losing Bosa for the whole year, and there was injury hell, that was what got Saleh the Jets job. And I think theoretically, he should be a better coach now because he's been through hell with the Jets. I mean, that was dysfunctional, but I think that you would expect that he's matured as a coach. He's seen how the other side of the league works, and he could bring some of that leadership back to the 49ers. So I don't think it's too simple of an answer. I think that it makes a whole lot of sense, but I think it actually might be out of the 49ers' reach because he's interviewing for head coaching jobs. So
okay. So 2 points. I'll get to that in a second. The other point I just want to make on that, there is this ongoing kind of, is Nick Bosa didn't even get 10 sacks? Is he worth, right? The Niners, Connor over on my show got this from Sports Info Solutions. Even in Nick Bosa's 2022 Defensive Player of the Year season, they brought more design pressure than Sorensen did last season. In 22, the Niners blitz rate was 17th. 24% of the time they brought pressure. This year it was 30th, 18% of the time. In other words, like, you go look at Nick Bosa's advanced metrics, they were still very good this year.
Yeah,
right.
Top 5.
But he can't. There is no. He does need. I would love to look up and say that the defensive personnel they have around him is good enough. That you don't need to go get another edge rusher. That it should be good enough with this personnel. But they've got to fix something, and it's, bringing a little more pressure, being a little more creative on defense is probably and I hate to use this word, easier fix than just let's get way better talent on the defensive line. That's harder and more expensive.
It is, yeah. And it's really hard to believe that they're ever going to be able to accumulate the amount of Ferrari firepower that they had in 2019 for the defensive line. You make a great point about Ryans in 22. That was an extension of the late 21 season when he really figured out how to be a DC and figure out how to blitz. Remember the shark blitz from K'Wan Williams that saved them. It saved the playoff run in a game at Cincinnati. They needed every single win, right? And there was a game where they beat the Bengals in Cincinnati. That was the AFC champion to be Bengals in Cincinnati, where DeMeco Ryans called 2 blitzes in the second half that came on critical third downs. One came from K'Wan Williams, I believe. Another one might have come from Greenlaw or Warner. But the Williams one really stood out to me in that it was like, oh, DeMeco Ryans has figured it out. He is firing with this blitz at just the right time. And then we saw a great run where he was able to mask a poor secondary down the stretch up until the NFC Championship game when it finally caught up to the 49ers. And then that carried over into the stat that you brought in 2022 when they brought that blitz rate up to middle of the pack. To, further talk about Sorensen's lack of blitzing, they were number 30, as you mentioned. That's general blitz rate. Bringing 2 or more extra rushers, they were dead last. They did that only 1.7% of the time. And when you're looking at the league and how it's operating now, the antidote to these Shanahan-style offenses, which have taken over, and you saw it with the Lions and Darnold, is to bring very heavy targeted pressure to challenge some of the protection answers up front. And the 49ers have been sunk by this. We saw it in the Super Bowl with Spagnuolo with 9 unblocked pressures. The Vikings got sunk by it the other night, and the 49ers aren't doing much sinking of their own with their own defense if they're only doing that 1.7% of the time. So they have to adapt. They have to modernize. And the question is, okay, so somebody like Saleh, who didn't blitz a whole lot when he was with the 49ers, can he be a defensive coordinator that modernizes? I think he can, because I think he showed a little bit of that in 2020, and I think he showed a little bit more of it with the Jets. By the way, the Jets defense fell off a cliff the moment that Robert
I saw you
Saleh
tweet
was
that
fired.
yesterday.
Yeah. And I think Olbrich is good too. I think what happened with the Jets is that Woody Johnson made the very childish move of firing Robert Saleh after they lost a game in London because he was embarrassed in front of all his London friends, because Woody Johnson used to be the ambassador to the UK. Did you read that in The Athletic? That was crazy. I mean, are you kidding me? That was sometimes you wonder with these owners. It's like that's like 5-year-old behavior, like, oh, my friends, I was embarrassed to lose in front of my friends, so I'm just going to go fire the coach. But anyway, after he fired Saleh, that was obviously a big architect of what you're doing defensively. He's gone. Olbrich, who was the co-architect, is now moved to an interim head coaching position, so he can't really focus on being the architect of the defense the way that he was before. So no wonder your defense falls off a cliff. Like it's this Captain Obvious kind of moment, but maybe it wasn't to the Jets ownership, which is why the Jets are the Jets. I think that Olbrich is cut from a similar cloth as Saleh, though. I thought that they got along very well in New York as far as making a good defense. It was a top 5 defense with those 2 guys at the top of the brain trust. And then you could also add in that Olbrich has a pre-existing relationship with Kyle Shanahan from his days with the Falcons.
So the question is Robert Saleh getting any of these head coaches jobs? He's the Patriots, the Bears, the Jags, the Raiders, the Saints. He is interviewing with the Jags on the 14th, and he's interviewing with the Raiders on the 16th. You'd love to move even quicker than that and get this thing settled, but you can't. Is he getting any of these head coaching jobs? And if he's not, would you be his first pick for a defensive coordinator job? Like maybe he waits around to see what are the Lions, maybe Aaron Glenn gets a job. Maybe I'll hang around and see, maybe maybe Steve Spagnuolo gets a job, although I would love for Steve Spagnuolo to get a job.
Or maybe the Packers get lit up in the playoffs and Hafley's gone. And look, Saleh is really good friends and former roommates with Matt LaFleur. He's the offensive consultant there. Now, mind you that Saleh is an offensive consultant for the Packers. I find that to be really interesting. I think that shows some of his development as a coach. He had worked only on the defensive side of the ball over the course of his career, but now that he's been a head coach, he got to see how both sides work, and they brought him in for offensive help with Green Bay. But anything could happen. And I think that Jeff Hafley, who's the former 49ers DB coach before he left to be the head coach of Boston College, I think he's been really good. I've been impressed with the body of work. But in this unpredictable league, if Green Bay just gets the doors blown off of it defensively here in the postseason, and Robert Saleh is really good friends with Matt LaFleur, and he's already in the building, well, you can put 2 and 2 together. That can happen as well. Yeah. So
that's a good point.
We don't know what's going to happen. And that's why, the 49ers, they have to walk a tightrope here. Yes, they're onto this process earlier than they had been in the past, but guys like Saleh have other options, interviews further into the future. If that's your guy and you're going to wait for him, if that doesn't end up working out, then you got to make sure that your other good candidates are also still on the board.
Well, and that's where I think there's a safety net possibility here for the Niners, which is Jeff Ulbrich getting a defensive coordinator job somewhere else? If Jeff Ulbrich does not get offered a defensive coordinator job somewhere else, assuming he's not retained by the Jets, is there a world where Jeff Ulbrich says, okay, Niners, I will be your safety net option. I want to be back there, right? This was a big story last season, that even while he was under contract with the Jets, the Niners were trying to get him before they hired Nick Sorensen. So I want to come back there. And I can see it from Jeff's perspective. This is where I want to be. I'll come join your staff, or at least I'll have the understanding that I'm going to join your staff. If Robert Saleh is your defensive coordinator, fine. I'll be on the defensive staff. And the reason I'll do that is because I want to be there, and I think Robert's going to get another job in a year or two, and then I'll slide into your DC spot. If Robert doesn't get your job, then I'll just be your defensive coordinator. What do you think
that would be great for, too, would be retaining Dre Greenlaw. I think that would give Greenlaw even more incentive to come back on a one-year deal, because I think he would love Saleh, but he would also love the former linebacker Ulbrich being on the 49ers coaching.
Yeah, I think the challenge with Dre Greenlaw is I would understand if you're him just taking the most money you can get. Like at this point, who knows if you're going to get back on the field. There may not be a lot out there, but I do think there's teams out there.
Yeah, the desperate bad teams.
Well, but I would say what I would say, David, is like teams that know him, that, the Texans, they just know him.
Yeah, which is another downstream effect, a negative effect of your coaching staff getting poached. Because not only are your coaches going elsewhere, those coaches are going to be familiar with players. We've already seen the Texans grab Azeez Al-Shire, so that they're going to want your guys in a way that, bad teams don't have to deal with that, because their staffs aren't populating the rest of the league. So yeah, I think right now it's a matter of, does Dre Greenlaw get that offer that the 49ers, I think the 49ers are very willing to do the 1-year deal where he gets significant compensation, $7-8 million, but I don't think that they want to go into the 3-year range with, the more of the prove it, a prove it plus deal.
But I'm a little surprised to hear you say even $8 million. You think he could get $7 or $8 million next year?
I think they could structure something with, you can add void years, and you could also, I don't think it would be guaranteed. I think you could earn up to that amount, so you could have a lot of incentives. And whatever is going to happen is incentive based, largely because he played only 34 snaps this season. But, I'm trying to cover this as fairly as possible from both sides of this negotiation. The 34 snaps he played, he was insanely explosive. I mean, it was special. Like I look at the fact that he tore his Achilles 305 days before he returned, which is not a lot of time at all. I thought he was going to come back and look slow, look rusty, have to knock off that rust. And he was awesome. I mean, from snap one against the Rams, he was really good. So I think you have to check 2 boxes in this league to earn a significant chunk of fully guaranteed money. You have to check the explosiveness box. You have to show that athletically you're there. And then 2, you have to check the durability box.
Yeah.
He checked one of those, right? Because he only lasted those 34 snaps. So I think that there should be significant upside to reach on his contract because of the explosiveness that he showed. But the floor is still too low to just go out and say, here's $8 million no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's a scary situation there. And I know, he came back quickly. McCaffrey said he would have been ready to play in the postseason. 2 of your best players dealing with, now McCaffrey's a knee, right? This is no longer the calf that McCaffrey's recovering from. But I would understand if there were a little PTSD from the McCaffrey situation as it relates to Dre Greenlaw. But he's, if you told me right now Dre Greenlaw's healthy next year, that it changes in a significant way the way you look at this 49ers defense for the better. But it's just such a big question mark right now.
Well, they only have 3 linebackers under contract at the moment for 2025. Warner, Winters, and Tatum Bethune, who's going to be the second-year man. So there's a lot of work to do at the linebacker position. And let me just zoom out and say we don't know who the coordinator is going to be. We don't know exactly what the 49ers are going to be running. I think there's potentially going to be more turnover there than any time in the 49ers regime here under Kyle Shanahan. So as Kyle said the other day, guys, like there's like 8 or 9 different variables that will determine whether or not Dre Greenlaw is back. And we haven't even really solved variable number 1 yet, but this is where it stands right now. Why don't we just kind of quickly run through this guy, a quarterback? This is interesting to me because the 49ers have turned into the quarterback rehab center, right? They've got Sam Darnold now off playing good football in Minnesota. We saw Josh Dobbs come through this year. I don't know if Dobbs is going to sign elsewhere or if that, there was what was it? Three giveaways against Arizona. Maybe his mark. I think the goal is if you come through as a backup to sign somewhere where you could at least be a bridge starter or have an opportunity to compete for the starting job. If teams don't think that of Josh Dobbs, maybe they can bring him back as the backup. But there's going to be other names, intriguing names at the quarterback position, such as a Daniel Jones, the 2 Joneses, the Mac Jones as well. But the 49ers
Mac is Mac is the one that would raise some eyebrows and makes a lot. He's a free agent. And he's closer. Well, I don't know. I mean, Daniel Jones is also young, but I would say he's closer to the Sam Darnold possibility in terms of, but his physicality is not there the way that Daniel Jones's physicality is there. But Mac Jones is the one that would raise eyebrows. Daniel Jones would not raise my eyebrows. Mac Jones would raise my eyebrows, knowing what we know about the Trey Lance draft.
Well, it would bring back all that speculation and all those stories from 2011. I think that I could see it happening because they've, especially Brian Greasy stays aboard. They have developed a reputation of getting the most out of quarterbacks who are in the building. Obviously, Purdy, Garoppolo had a really good run under Brian Greasy in 2022. Sam Darnold is an amazing success story of a turnaround for the 49ers. We didn't get to really see enough of Josh Dobbs to make a firm proclamation in either direction. That was the quarterback he was last year. He showed some explosiveness, but he also turned the ball over a lot. So anyway, I think the 49ers still have that a good reputation, especially with Brian Greasy and the work he's done. So I think guys who are in the career boats of a Daniel Jones or a Mac Jones, you can name probably a couple more
Wilson,
quarterbacks. Yeah, Zach Wilson. Guys like that would be very interested in signing with the 49ers. And you need that two-way street.
I do think we saw enough of Dobbs. Darnold was clearly QB2. So we didn't see enough of Darnold on the field. He basically played one game plus like a snap when Brock went out. Or actually, and then he stayed in that game. So like 1.5, not even. But he was clearly QB2. Josh Dobbs was not. So, that speaks volumes of the difference between the way they think of him and the way that Darnold's thought of. Although Darnold had been, such a premium prospect. Dobbs was not. And I do view those guys differently. I don't think Dobbs is anybody's bridge quarterback. I don't think he'll get that opportunity, at least going into a year, where I understood that why Darnold did. Zach Wilson might be the guy closest to Darnold in the group of Mac Jones and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, because you have that physical ability.
Right.
And he obviously flamed out in his first NFL opportunity. So you see what can happen moving forward. And it's funny because we're talking about these names from that 2021 draft where the 49ers, last time the 49ers had a pick around this portion of the draft, they traded up. Everybody thought that was going to be some kind of generational quarterback draft. It ended up not being a generational quarterback draft, but a lot of teams took their swings, their big swings, the 49ers included. But as irony would have it, they found their guy with the very last pick of the following draft. And now Brock Purdy is considered, it's not just, there it is, 262. And it's not just Brian Greasy, by the way. You hear players talk, and I think it was Josh Dobbs talking before the Cardinals game. It's working under Brock Purdy. So pick number 262 has turned into this mentor of types because of sorts, because the work ethic, the study habits, that's appealing to quarterbacks who are trying to find their way, coming from bad organizations where the process isn't necessarily instilled in a productive fashion. These guys come in and they say that they learn how to work. They learn how to run their week under Purdy.
I do wonder, though, is Brock at the level where it's better for him to have a guy like Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs or somebody that's been around versus a young guy who's here to learn? Brock is still pretty young, and I think would still benefit from a player who's been around a little bit. Not that he needs to learn from that person, but just the second set of eyes that a backup quarterback can be for a starting quarterback. I would prefer that to developmental next guy up. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't want QB2 for Brock Purdy to be some 5th round pick the Niners take, right? I want it to be Josh Dobbs or Brandon Allen or somebody of that ilk, someone who's been around and sees it, somebody who really sees it, not some guy who's learning the Shanahan system and is here to pick up tips from Brock Purdy. Now, maybe that's irresponsible. Maybe you just rather have the best player you could get to substitute if Brock gets hurt. But
I think that their budget, we'll see if the budget increases or decreases this year, but it was about $5 million for the QB2 spot last year. That's what it was with Darnold as well, although they had a deal where, because Brock was coming off of the elbow surgery, they had a deal that could escalate up to I think 11 or 12 million with Darnold. He obviously didn't earn the incentive since Purdy started the whole season, but I don't know if the budget will decrease this year. And if it decreases to something like 2 or 3 million, then you're probably out of the range of some of the guys that were drafted higher up in 2021. Those guys are probably going to want at least 5, and they'll probably go for that just because they still have some name recognition and the league will think they have some potential. And if you're in the budget of 2 or 3, then your backup is going to be probably, a Brandon Allen caliber, just how it works. But I don't know where the budget is. We're going to figure that out. Running back, I think projects to be really, really exciting for the 49ers next year because I think McCaffrey is going to be healthy. I think the other day he said, would have been very near ready to play in the playoffs, and he's going to have the long off season. And Guerendo escaped ACL hell. It was an MCL, but he should be ready to go in the offseason program. My big question is Jordan Mason. He's a restricted free agent, and this spot is empty right now. Is it going to be filled with Jordan Mason's name, or is the rest of the league, he ran the ball really well this year. He wasn't the best fit for the 49ers in the pass game, but he ran the ball really well this year. I think that there's a chance that his value is higher for some other team than for the 49ers, which could sort itself out in restricted free agency. Like the 49ers could tender Jordan Mason, but there's a chance that somebody offers him more, where 49ers would have a right of first refusal, but would they take that, right? Would they say, okay, fine, we'll pay you as much as the market dictates, kind of like the Brock Wright situation with Detroit and the 49ers last year, or would the 49ers let Mason walk? I think this could be really, really interesting with Jordan Mason, but at the end of the day, you do need running back depth. I just wonder what the 49ers budget there will be.
That's a great question. He's so clearly good enough to be running back 2. But if Christian McCaffrey's healthy, they don't use running back 2 hardly at all, right? Guerendo could be RB2. I think you've got to have a level of concern about McCaffrey. And I'm with you. Said you think he'll be back healthy. That's great. I'm in the hope category. I'm in the hope category. But, they're not really in the business of spending a bunch of money on RB2 and 3 and 4. Historically, the Shanahans don't need to. But it's just rare, to have a guy that's had the kind of year that Jordan Mason just had available to you as your second running back is a luxury.
Yeah.
Do you have a prediction?
Second round tender. And I think that's the right level of tender. That's about $5 million. If a team really, really wants Jordan Mason and they blow you away with an $8 or $9 or $10 million offer because he did run the ball really well, I could see a team like Baltimore really liking Jordan Mason. Then you say, fine, we get a second round pick. I think the 49ers would be really happy with that trade-off. I think that's what the RFA tender process is there for situations like this, where the player deserves to be compensated, because I mean, Mason, especially with the style of running that he brings, he deserves his money like now. Like that's important, right? So he deserves the chance to see what his market is with other teams. But the advanced metrics, actually just running wise and the yards after contact and the broken tackles, they were comparable to Derrick Henry's this year. And he's similar kind of build, right? Big back. But again, the 49ers have a certain set of needs and a certain budget. And I think this process can actually be perfect for both parties, in that the 49ers and Jordan Mason might both leave happy. And maybe the right resolution is him signing the tender and nobody offers him more than that. And the 49ers have him back on this roster, and they'll have that very needed depth behind Christian McCaffrey. Maybe that's the resolution. I just can't wait to see how it plays out, because I don't think that the stars have quite aligned in this way on any of these restricted free agent deals. Receiver. So receiver, Pearsall's emergence toward the end of the season is some of the best news that the 49ers got in 2024. Because Ricky's not going to be an X, but you paid Brandon Ayuk to be the X. I don't know when exactly he's going to be back, but you would hope at least at some point next season. And hey, maybe it will be week 1, because he got hurt fairly early in 2024, but we'll see. And you like Jennings a lot, but Jennings, I think, is at his very deadliest when he doesn't have to be the featured X, because then you could have a great separator, and Jennings can separate, but you don't have to have him with the focus of the defense on the X position. He could be at either the Z, where he blew up against the Rams back in week 3. He can play at the F. Ricky Pearsall can play anywhere, but I don't think he would specialize at the X, but he could be anywhere else and be really good. And then that allows, assuming Deebo Samuel is back, and they seem to hint that that's the plan, that allows Deebo to be Deebo. It allows him to be this specialty weapon that just bulldozes people. This year, they had he was playing hurt, and he was playing with pneumonia and all that stuff, but they also there weren't other weapons out there because they were so hurt. So there was a lot of focus on Deebo Samuel. But when there's not defensive focus on Deebo Samuel, that's when he turns into the battering ram that we've seen over the years. And I think that would be the 49ers blueprint for this.
Yeah, I also think he's back, which means he's probably extended. But remember, I think they were open to trading him. They know what the value out there for him is going into last year, because they took phone calls before the second day of the draft last year on him and Ayuk, right? And at least the bat signal was out that you could call if you're interested.
Yeah. They're not letting him walk out the door for nothing, right?
They're not getting, what would you trade for him at this point if you're another franchise?
Yeah, it's tough. It's coming off of an injury-riddled year, a sickness-riddled year. He had the pneumonia too. There was a little bit of drama before that Rams game when he posted on social media that he wasn't getting the ball, and then he dropped the touchdown pass that essentially sealed the 49ers' fate on the season. So it wasn't a good year for Deebo Samuel. Nobody's pretending that it was a good year, but I think people are leaving context out. With both Deebo and Bosa, they were playing through oblique injuries this year. And obliques, it's really tough to be explosive in short area if your oblique is hurt. I think both of those players looked a little bit slower in short area. What I found interesting is that Deebo's top end speed actually was still there. We saw it on the kick returns, but it was some of the quick change of direction stuff that wasn't quite there, and the power wasn't as great as it was. And that, that it's a oblique. Like the symptoms of an oblique injury, you saw all of them for Deebo Samuel this year, plus pneumonia that could take weeks to recover from. Either way, my main point is that the 49ers, I think, are looking at this as Deebo's stock has never been lower, and they think it's only going to climb next year. And that's got to be part, and he's already under contract with you. And other teams are going to be, if you're going to acquire Deebo Samuel and send capital over to the 49ers, you're going to be much more wary if that stock is really low, because that could be a burn of an investment that could be bad for you. So the most likely scenario here is the 49ers are the ones that could benefit from that stock rising again if he's still under contract.
I don't see him any longer as a tradable stock even into the future. You just have to find a way to make him a useful player for you. If you're the Niners.
And I think that all starts with the talent around him. If Deebo is forced into one position where we saw them force feeding Deebo Samuel against the Rams, and that was something I was really critical of Kyle Shanahan about. I don't think Shanahan had a good year play calling at all, but I also will acknowledge I see why Kyle Shanahan felt the need to do that, because he didn't have Ayuk on the field. He didn't have McCaffrey on the field. Pearsall, rookie, still hadn't truly emerged at that time yet. It wasn't until the final couple weeks that Pearsall really did. So I see why Kyle Shanahan felt the need to force feed Deebo Samuel, but that also defeats the essence of Deebo Samuel. He's the guy that, you scheme for everybody else, and then Deebo just comes and blasts you. Right.
Yeah.
So
but we've seen Kyle turn, not every time, as someone pointed out to me back when we were talking about that game, but Kyle's actions tell us he really believes that Deebo Samuel can jumpstart his offense, right? His play calling tells us that he values Deebo, because he turns to him in critical times to carry him. And, I think that's a signal for what's gonna come in 2025. And if Ayuk's healthy and Pearsall is developing, then maybe that can work, as long as he doesn't call a run play on 3rd and 6, because everybody got very mad about calling a run play for Deebo on 3rd and 6. But
look what I'm doing at tight end.
You're putting Tyler Warren in at tight end too. All right,
there we go. There's your roster for next year.
Can we
everybody take your screenshots for when they actually draft him at number 11?
Can we talk about kicker? I'm sorry, are we skipping ahead too far if we talk about kicker?
No. Should I keep Warren on there?
Well, it's up to you. That's your spreadsheet, not mine.
I've got here, before I forget, then people are going to complain. People always find something to complain about. All right, Braden Willis is back on the team for now. Down to kicker. Let's talk about it. What do you want him to do with Jake Moody? And what do you, if you were the GM, what would you do? Let's frame it that way.
Well, I'd be looking for other options.
But would you keep Moody on the roster?
At this point, yeah. Like right now, absolutely. What choice do I have? He doesn't cost me. He's not expensive.
No, yeah, it's a preset cost. So you're saying, because I personally would keep him on the roster, bring in competition, and have him aboard, a plan to have him aboard through at least the cut down to 53.
That's a great plan. I think the problem with that plan is that he's probably going to win a competition with. I mean, he's going to win a competition with any. Who are you bringing in competition? He's going to kick the ball further than these guys, right? In a kicker competition.
Well, he's got to make them, and there'll be pressure. And
but you remember when Zane Gonzalez was here?
Yes,
2 years. It was the Darnold camp.
Yeah, yes,
2 years ago.
ASU product.
He came from the Panthers. It was whatever. Like Moody beat him, or it was even. Or
I would argue that if Moody beats him, maybe you got the guy that started this season 13 or 14 back. Right?
Maybe, yeah.
Especially if you really hold his feet to the fire with his preseason games as well. You're not just kicking in practice; you'll have him kicking games too. So
yeah. The crux of my argument is he's good enough to win these competitions. Something happens in these games.
Well, what
I can't explain.
Well, let's look at the split. It was 13 of 14, and then he sprained his ankle, and he was out, and then he was 10 of 19 or whatever.
I know.
So there was a clear delineation. Something got in his head after. Maybe it's still physical. I don't know, but assuming it's not physical, it's mental, which is scary because you don't know if and when he's going to snap out of it. And I think that the only way that he possibly can snap out of it is if you put him through a hell of a stress test and he passes it. And The only way you can do that is in camp and in the preseason this next year. But you better have Anders Carlson or somebody that doesn't have a job on speed dial when maybe you continue to hold his feet to the fire by finding some kind of kicker and putting him on the practice squad at the start of the year. And that way you can yank him immediately if there are issues. But a lot of people would say, and I'm sure the comment section's blowing up right now, it's not worth it. Just cut him right now. And I totally get it after you went through what you saw. But I think there's a fear from the 49ers that they do that. Then he signs with somebody else. And the talent that you're talking about consistently shines on the field with somebody else.
Well,
say,
yeah, I mean, Kyle is clearly very affected by what happened when he was coaching with his dad in Washington, where Graham Gano came in as a young kicker and wasn't good enough for them, and they ran out of patience, and they cut Graham Gano, and Graham Gano went on to have a really good career, right? I think that's really in Kyle's mind. Like, if I keep waiting it out with this guy, kickers eventually do figure it out.
Yeah,
young kickers that are talented. And I think they're kind of stuck. I just don't think there's a lot of great options out there for them. You cut them and you sign whoever, Michael Badgley or Nick Folk, and they're no more. You know what I mean? Like you're missing
Nick Folk now. I'm gonna look.
I don't know, 40 probably.
That guy's been around forever. Let's look. You're guessing 40?
Yeah, I'm guessing 40.
I'm gonna guess 41.
Okay.
Oh no, he's 40. You got me. When does he turn 41? November 5th. Yeah, so still 11 months away. He just turned 40. That's a really good guess. Nick Folk has been with the Cowboys, the Jets. He's been in the league since 2007. The Bucks. Then he played for the Arizona Hotshots. Is that it? That's a team. That's a thing. The Arizona
Hotshots. That's got to be XFL, right?
Looking right now. 2019. We're professional. No, that was in the AAF, the Alliance of
AAF.
Football. It was in that 2019 season where that was a very short-lived league. You know who the head coach was? Rick Neuheisel. What? You knew that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you didn't know. So you had heard of there. I thought
I just got all those leagues confused. I didn't know which was the AAF because they played simultaneously, and now the XFL has continued. But I think they almost won the championship.
So are you saying you want the 49ers to bring in Arizona Hotshots legend Nick Folk to be the kicker?
No, I'm saying there are no good options to solve. This is a tough situation for them. And I know some people would say, to your point, it's not tough. I'm mad at he cut him, which I understand. But you know, kickers are the next guy's always supposed to be better, and you may end up in the same situation. It's likely you end up in the same situation again. So you don't want to hold on too long, but I could see how it's so frustrating because you see what a weapon he can be. The craziest thing about Moody, if I could just not analyze it and just talk for a second about like what it's like to experience him. We all watch a lot of kickers miss kicks. His misses are so close.
It's always to the
way
right.
It feels like his. Did you see the game-winning kick? I know you saw it on Thursday night.
He overcompensates sometimes. Yeah, the game. Wait, which game-winning kick?
Well, the Notre Dame kick, which it looked like it was going to Moody right, and then it Moody back left.
Yep, that was wild to me. And speaking of that, I guess they had the worst kicking situation in the nation. Again, I watch college very casually during the season because I'm so locked in on the NFL. So I get what I get from the announcing crew, and they were telling me about how bad this kicking situation was. I'm like, there's no way this is going to end well. And then it goes off his foot, and it's headed wide right, and it knuckled back in. I don't know how he did it, but he got it. His name was Jeter too.
When they showed his family filming from the crowd, I was like, oh God, please. I wasn't even rooting for Notre Dame, but I didn't want him to miss while his dad was filming the thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, what does his dad do with the video if he misses? I guess he just deletes it right away. There's no way you want
to. Tough life.
I was like, I thought his parents were the people not filming. I assumed that his parents were.
I didn't know who was who, but
no, it was his dad that was filming.
Okay.
It was. Yeah, I did that. I confirmed that. It was crazy. Anyway, yeah, it's going to be interesting what they do with Moody in that regard. But I think your Gano point hits the nail on the head. I think they're scarred. They don't want to let a guy go and only see him star elsewhere. I promise here we'll wrap up soon. We've been going for a while, but quickly we can go through what other position group do you want to look at? Do you have any order of preference here? We've gone through about half of them.
Yeah, I think to me, safety's interesting.
Safety is really interesting because I think Jair regressed this year. I don't think that he had a good year. And Malik Mustafa was damn good. That if there was one true silver lining from 2024, it was the draft class. It probably was the best. It was definitely the best top to bottom the 49ers have had under Lynch and Shanahan as far as producing in year one. I think it has a good chance because of that to be the best draft class they've had. That won't be determined for another year or two, but Malik Mustafa right here at safety is a player. Now, is Jair Brown a player? But because they ended up not really benching him, but reducing his role significantly by the end of the year. Talanoa Hufanga is a pending free agent. Do they go that route? Are they able to get him back on a prove-it deal? Do they feel the need to do that because they don't trust Jair Brown, who missed a lot of tackles this year? I don't know. The big thing about the defense was that they forced only 2 takeaways, and I think they only forced one of those. Caleb Williams just threw the ball backwards one time. That was a fumble, but they only forced those 2 takeaways over the course of the last 9 games. And Jair Brown was a guy who had a lot of picks in college, and then he had the pick of Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and he just never seemed to be in good position for anything this past year.
Yeah, I think he's partly a complimentary safety, and he was drafted to play alongside and then replace Hufanga, and neither one of those things are happening. Didn't really play alongside him, and he's probably not going to be his replacement. What do you do? Or do you keep him around? Or is Hufanga back? Hufanga, it looked like 2 years ago, might be too expensive to keep around. Maybe he's not anymore, but you can't.
Now Hufanga seems like an ideal candidate for a prove-it deal. He's in a very similar boat to Greenlaw. He played more, but he looked really good the moment that he returned. But then it tapered off a little bit toward the end, and there was some plays that Dortch was able to get past the Hufanga tackle to score the touchdown against the 49ers on Sunday. So, and then I think he's still not fully there yet because he's still coming off of the injury that forced him to wear the club. So I still think that he obviously is not in position to get a contract that matches the fact that he was an all-pro in 2022, but he might be in position to get a deal that sets him up for a nice 2025 that, or was it? Yeah, it was 2022 when he was an all-pro, right? Yeah, 2022. And a prove-it deal could set him up for 2025. The 49ers look to have a need at safety. Again, just like the Greenlaw situation that we can't really answer right now, we can't answer this one because we don't know who the coordinator is going to be. And that's a preceding variable in this case.
John Lynch said, we think we'll have 8. We think we'll have 9 picks. He said, we have 8 picks. We think we'll get a 9th.
I think he was 9 and 10. He said,
9 and 10.
Yeah,
okay.
9 and 10. Yeah.
Is he talking about Mooney Ward? What comp pick does he think they're getting?
Well, the comp pick, they might. Well, the comp picks would be from last year. Let me open up the phone.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Okay, got it. Yep.
So let's see what they.
Would it be Armstead's money?
Well, it's a big formula that includes everybody in it. So it's hard to say because guys eliminate other guys. I'm looking at it right now. Let's try to find the compensatory pick formula on Over the Cap 2025. Okay, here we go. I'll put this up on the screen in just a second because you could only do this visually.
I mean, they didn't have any big money signings.
Hopefully people can see this. This is
okay. Yeah, that's good.
You can zoom in on your phone, or I could try to zoom in.
That's fine. Just Chase Young.
We're gonna go back there. Yeah, Chase Young, and then they think they're gonna get something a little bit more from Sam Darnold. I think because of the performance this year.
Okay.
So I think that Darnold will no longer be crossed off or something. I don't really know how this formula mathematically works, but I think that the difference between 9 and 10 will be if Darnold factors higher into the compensatory formula. Because you signed guys like Floyd, Gross-Matos, Yadam, and Elliott that cancel out Darnold, Kinlaw, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Charlie Werner leaving. But if Darnold is at a higher tier than Leonard Floyd, they're currently canceling each other out. That gives you another comp pick. It might be a low one, but it gives you another pick.
Okay.
I
pray I'm not looking at a comp pick chart on January 10th, 2026. That's all I can say.
You're officially a sick.
This is my fault. I asked about it.
Yeah.
But thank you I'm glad you're here to analyze it.
Well, hopefully you learned something new.
I did. I learned that. I learned that page exists is what I just learned.
Look, we got a comment. Comp pick chart. This is the good stuff.
Yeah, this is the good stuff.
This is what people tune in for. Here you go again if you need
I'm going to save this part of the video for late Friday night. Come back to it.
49ers have played the comp pick game really well. They've modeled how they operate after the Ozzie Newsome Ravens, the Belichick Patriots. Those are all teams that
won Super Bowls.
Yeah, and the goal is to stay good for a long time. And the only way you do that is if you draft well, and not just like first rounders, because those are expensive guys usually, right? Even under the rookie wage scale. You have to draft well in the later rounds. And the only way that you draft well in the later rounds is if you have a lot of picks. Because nobody truly knows what they're doing in the later rounds. Right? Like you can maximize your chances, but there is no, like we're gonna kill the 5th or 6th or the 7th round with every single pick. The shotgun approach is how it works, because you have to hope that you get as many hits as possible.
Right. Because you're not going like, we're taking Nick Zakelj and Kalia Davis and Tyreek Castro Fields in the 6th round, but wait till we get to the 7th. We're going to take this Purdy guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Purdy did that.
He had 3 shots to draft him for the 6th round and didn't do it.
But Purdy was a compensatory pick that came from CJ Beathard walking. So it just the lesson there is that you do what you can, let the talent that needs to walk, amass as many picks as possible, and then your chances of hitting on a Brock Purdy are inherently higher. You make your luck, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember. I'm trying to find the note. I can't find it here, David. But it's been, if you go back to when the draft expanded or maybe when they made it smaller, whatever year it was, 94, like there's only been 262 picks twice in the last, 30 years of NFL drafts. There used to be a bunch of rounds, but there's only been 262 picks twice. Like to your point on comp picks, it changes every year. And there's a lot of last picks, but there's only a couple guys who go 262. It's amazing.
Really cool. Where's the hat at? I want to see it one more time. You selling them yet, by the way?
Oh yeah, they're available. You can buy them.
How do my subscribers
heyguy.co.
Heyguy.co.
There's black, there's red, there's white.
It's a nice hat. It's a really nice hat.
Yeah.
I still don't have one. I'm gonna go. Don't worry, I'm gonna buy one. I'm not looking for a freebie.
No, you should. It's okay. You buy a hat, I'll subscribe to the standard.
Okay, it'll be a trade. It'll be good. Let's finish this up with a look at what we haven't seen yet. This is fun, by the way. Hey, if you've got some kind of hard out, let me know. I know we didn't talk about that, and
I mean, just my own stamina, but
this is fun. We haven't done this in a while, and I feel that it's just fun to kind of sit back and look at the roster for the first time. I haven't done this yet, actually, in a show of my own, so it's fun to just sit back and talk about it. We've talked about the offensive line. We've drafted Tyler Warren. We've talked about the receivers. We've talked about running backs, quarterback, linebacker. We talked about safety. So all we have left, let's just get to the finish line. All we have left is corner and defensive line. Since we're talking about safety, we might as well just group in corner here. They've got 2 starters penned in at this point. This is in ink. Lenore and Renardo Green, right? These are good players. Lenore should have been a Pro Bowler. He wasn't, but statistically, he was better than the guys that got picked, and he had a harder job because he was playing both nickel and outside. So he's solid. They paid him. We were actually live when they paid him. Remember that last time we were live? Got the contract.
Lenore. Yes.
It was like
Vaguely?
we were
Oh, we were about to go live.
yeah, we were
That's
about
right.
to go live. I'm
I
like,
do
well, let's
remember
just
that.
talk about Diamond Lenore's 5-year, $87.5 million deal or whatever it was. And yeah. So anyway, he's solid and he's there. And I think Renardo Green was very impressive. I mean, the ball skills that he showed as a rookie, he never once looked lost, which almost every rookie looks lost at some point. I don't think he ever did. Like Ricky Pearsall had a really good year. He was lost against the Dolphins with 2 illegal formation penalties.
What about the touchdown in the right flat against?
Was that okay? I didn't figure. Was that on him? Was that on Renardo?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was some confusion on the defensive. Yeah, I don't know.
I saw that as the moment that turned the tide against Sorensen because they showed Lynch slam the table.
Yeah.
And okay, so if that was Renardo Green's fault, that would have been his one rookie moment. And I think my point would still be there was only one of those. And he locked down DK Metcalf in a big win for the 49ers. The ball skills were awesome up until the very end. And he's going to be one of their top 2 corners next year, or top 3 if they bring back Charvarius Ward. We'll see what happens there. That's trending toward unlikely. Although, yeah, there's a big complication in that he said that he's got PTSD from being in California. So you have to respect Charvarius Ward and I mean, he came back to work despite that tragedy. He even said that he might have come back a little too soon, but he might, from a football standpoint, be in a similar boat as a Hufanga, as a Greenlaw, in that he didn't play his best year. And he acknowledged that himself. He's like, yeah, I would have been worth a whole lot more following 2023 when I was all pro. So he thinks that there is a chance, as he openly said, the market might be a little bit depressed this year. And that might be where the 49ers can come back and get him. But he did mention, straight up said, this was a tremendously candid interview, straight up said that entering this season, the 49ers thoughts were that they weren't going to be able to afford me for 2025. But he said that could have changed because I went through a lot. It was the worst year of my career and I didn't play that well. I mean, I love a guy being that honest. I thought all props to him. But so we'll see how that works out. But I think in all likelihood, some team is going to realize, hey, this guy went through a ton. He's going to be incentivized to not be where the PTSD is. And he'll deservingly get a contract the 49ers can't match.
Yeah, I think that's likely.
Yeah. So do they draft a guy or here, Luter? I know Luter is a name that 49ers fans don't like to hear because of the special teams miscues. He's caused one in the Super Bowl and he caused one against Tampa Bay, but he looked really good as a corner in training camp and they really like him. And he's been around the system for 2 years now. They had been preparing him to take over as one of the corners in year 3 behind the scenes. And despite the special teams gaffes, I don't think that speaks to his ability covering as a corner. He might be somebody that ascends up the pecking order for the 49ers this year.
Yeah, I think the special teams is part of the reason people don't, love hearing about Luter. I think the other reason is because, and I don't say this, I know sometimes when people say what I'm about to say, it's like derisive. The media has been saying, but I'm not saying it that way. But the media has been talking about Darrell Luter Jr. for a few years as if he's about to be their number 1 nickel. And it hasn't even come close to transpiring, partly because of injury. So I think there's probably a little fatigue from that too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he does not appear to me to about to be a starting nickel in the NFL, given he hasn't really been a productive understudy.
Yeah. Well, one thing is that he was hurt for the back half of this season, so he wasn't available for the 49ers. So we'll see. He's going to be in that competition. I think people here's what I'll say about Luter. Here's what I know is that they love the length. He got long arms, and they love the character on the guy, and they do think that he could be an inside out kind of player. And they were trying to give him early action on special teams. I think the play in the Super Bowl was tremendously unlucky. I don't think that we should use that to judge Darrell Luter Jr. as a player. I thought the play against Tampa Bay was worse when he got pushed into Jacob Cowing on the muffed punt. But he's going to be in that mix, and then whoever else is in that mix, we'll see. But they have They have, Chase Lucas. He's more of a practice squad guy. He's on the team. They have a lot of moves to make here. So they're probably going to bring in a rookie or two. They're probably going to make a signing like the Rock Yassin signing last year. There's a lot of work, more work here in the back seven of the defense than anywhere else on the roster, as you can see on this depth chart. There's more empty spots in this area that's linebacker and defensive back than anywhere else.
Well, next year would be the year for Luter, right? Next year is the equivalent year to when Lenore really broke out.
Yes.
The third year for another 5th round cornerback that the Niners had. So, I if it's going to happen, to me, it has to happen in 2025 for Darrell Luter. The Niners have had a couple linebackers that we've kind of been waiting on to step up, and D Winters got opportunities this year, but they're always trying to find somebody better. And, Jalen Graham behind him was a guy that I know there've been some anticipation for, and it just hasn't really come to fruition in terms of plugging them in especially D Winters, even as a starter. I think we're nearing the I don't want to say the expiration date on kind of the development of those guys, but there've been chances and opportunities, and they have not taken them fully.
I think your really salient point there, though, is that it was third year for Lenore, and it was also third year for DJ Reed. That was another 5th round corner out of Bakersfield. My cousin from Bakersfield, by the way, was here, which was funny. It seems that you mention one city or something and it comes up like 3 times, but
all roads lead to the Central Valley.
Yep. What's that song? The Streets of Bakersfield. It's a good country song. They mentioned San Francisco in it too. I think he mentions in the song that he spent a night in jail in San Francisco. Very Wild West vibes, but anyway, DJ Reed, remember when they accidentally released him? Or I say accidentally, I mean they intentionally they waived him with an injury designation thinking that he wouldn't get picked up, and the Seahawks picked him up and he turned into high-level corner.
Yeah.
So year three for these corners. Don't give up on guys. That was the lesson. Don't give up on a corner, 5th round corner entering year 3.
All right.
Final position. I know that we're all running out of steam here, but the defensive line, they've got a lot of guys under contract, and Bosa, back when things were peaking for this 49ers defense, that was the Rams game or the aftermath of that. Bosa came out and said, I hope that we bring all these guys back, and it's good that they're all on at least 2-year deals. Like they signed or they traded for Malik Collins and he had a 2-year deal. They signed Yetur Gross-Matos to 2 years. They signed Leonard Floyd to 2 years. They signed Jordan Elliott to 2 years. So Bosa was like, we're really finding our stride, which it seemed that they were. And he wanted everybody back. And maybe everybody will be back, but they could still use more juice, I think, really clearly. Somebody like Elliott just didn't bring him anything pass rushing wise. Malik Collins did. He was nice pass rushing wise, but I think they need, if they're not going to be getting a lot pass rushing wise from Elliott, they need to be better against the run. And maybe that was a wide 9 linebacker thing because they didn't have Greenlaw this year. But I obviously think that some improvement obviously still warranted from that defensive line, which was missing Javon Hargrave for most of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question with this defense is Leonard Floyd, can you improve your defense in a way that Leonard Floyd or a player of Leonard Floyd's ilk is a good enough opposite pass rusher for Bosa? Or does it, how do you make that happen, right? How do you make it so that a Leonard Floyd level player is good enough to have a disruptive defensive line?
You have to be better at tackle. I think the plan was to have Hargrave in there, who looked really good his last game before he tore the triceps against the Rams. He had 6 pressures, and obviously that went that direction. I think that you have to have a plus defensive tackle who's commanding a lot of pass rushing attention, and that ensures that Leonard Floyd is going to get the one-on-ones that he needs. Leonard Floyd had 8.5 sacks, so it wasn't like he was unproductive this year. But I think for this line to deliver the kind of pressure that they really wanted it to at the start of the year, it was dependent on Hargrave, which is why they paid him a lot of money. Now they have salary cap constraints, so they're going to release Hargrave with a post June 1st designation, but hope that he negotiates with them to come back at a lower deal. Eric Armstead was approached with a similar offer last year, and he said no to the 49ers. He said, I'm going to go take more money from Jacksonville. I think that they sprung it on Eric Armstead much later in the process last year. This year, because Hargrave has been hurt and they've had a chance to pre-plan things, they did it earlier. They said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We still want you back. And I think it's not been as much of a shock. And I think that last year emotions got involved in the Eric Armstead situation where, he felt disrespected by the 49ers. He even said that. I think maybe the bridge has been smoothed over with Hargrave to where they might be able to get him back. But you do need some explosive pass rushing talent on the inside to do what you're talking about. And that is spring somebody like Leonard Floyd available for sacks as much as possible.
Yeah. Then that's what they need. Because the run stopping is another part of this, right? Maybe the more important part.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think we can't look at the defensive line in a vacuum there. I think that in the wide nine, and I don't know if they're going to continue running the wide nine, they probably will, but in the wide nine, the linebackers are so important because the gaps are bigger. And I think the loss of Dre Greenlaw hurt the 49ers terribly this past season. But there were already slips in run defense the year prior. And they had Armstead that year, but Armstead was injured for a lot of the year and he wasn't the same player as he had been before. So that also goes back to defensive tackle. That it goes back to setting edges, which they didn't do a great job of in 2023 or 2024. So there's a lot to fix. This run defense slipped down to number 29 this year. That was really bad. And it's a reason why they're going to have their third defensive coordinator in 3 years. And near the top of the list is the fact they haven't stopped the run over the past two.
Yep. And I think it contributes to that. What's the stat? 0-44? Trailing in the fourth quarter by 7 or more.
Interesting. Yeah.
Whatever that Shanahan stat, whatever the Shanahan stat is, 1 in 46, whatever. There's a couple different.
What was the one win? Because it wasn't the NFC title because they came back too soon. They came back in the third quarter.
Yeah. So it might be 0-44 still. I thought there was one last year, but then
this year
changed.
They came back in the fourth this year against Tampa Bay, but I don't think they were ever down 7 or more. Anyway, what was your point? Like the stats
that run defense is a part of coming back. Run defense is part of winning games that you trail.
Yes, because otherwise you just get strangled, right? Yeah. Otherwise you
it's
just
what the Niners do.
The Rams ran the clock out on the 49ers this year. A lot. I mean,
which is not what the Rams have done in years past. In years past, you punt to the Rams, you make them run the ball, you stop them, and they punt back to you, right?
Yeah.
And then that has worked against the Rams.
Yep, exactly. So I remember that the Rams got the ball back, and I don't blame that game on the defense at all, actually, but because let me retract that. I do. They dropped interceptions in the first half. But I put the majority of the blame on the offense in that game. But it is still worth noting that they couldn't stop that run the way that they had before. So you figure out a way to stop the run. It might require schematic adjustments. Maybe you just don't have the horses to stop the run at the level you need to when you're risking stuff with the wide nine, because the wide nine is it's like pushing your chips into the middle of the table for pass rush. You're giving the edge rushers a better angle, and you're giving your defensive tackles a bigger island to work on as far as one-on-one battles against guards, but you're also leaving bigger gaps for the run game. So Green Bay was running those delays to Josh Jacobs. They just killed the 49ers. Hand off to Jacobs. There's a big gap. Linebacker plays terrible. Jair Brown is not tackling well. That's the result you're going to get. So that's the result the 49ers have to change this year.
It'll be interesting. I thought Kyle sounded pretty open-minded, borderline excited to sit down and talk to defensive coordinator candidates and hear people's ideas for how to make his defense better. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what you're referring to when you say, we'll see if the wide nine is back or not. But that's an interesting part of this offseason is what are the ideas he hears and how open-minded is he to changing things on defense?
Yeah.
I just think he doesn't want to have to oversee the defense. You have a defensive coordinator who let him be the head coach of the defense. I'll be hands off. Go make things happen. The same way he's happy to let Mike McDaniel take over the run game or whatever. It frees him up to do more other stuff.
Kubiak,
yeah.
Coordinator, yeah. It's gonna be good. You have any final thoughts here?
Yeah, it feels like their plan on offense is to kind of run it back with the skill guys and get healthy and be a better defensive team and be better in the red zone. Somebody made the comment earlier we didn't address, but part of helping your kicker out, whoever it is asking them to kick less and scoring more in the red zone and not relying on field goals. When you're not in 1-point games and low-scoring games, missed field goals hurt you less. And, that's not a solution. You want a guy that's going to make big kicks. I understand that. We all agree on that. But they can help themselves not be as reliant on the field goal kicker by being a better offensive and defensive team.
Absolutely. It was number 11 offense, number 26 defense, and number 32 special teams this year. So I don't think that it's surprising at all that the coordinators of the units ranked 26 and 32 are being replaced.
Yeah.
And they're also, the offense dropped from number 1 to number 11. There was a regression on that side as well. And we've talked so much about why that regression happened, and that's something they're going to try to turn around too. And I do think that there is more significance than a lot of people realize to Kubiak earning the respect of the OC title. Last time that has, and the only time that's happened under Kyle Shanahan, had been with McDaniel in 2021. That was a really good offense. The 21 offense, the 49ers went through a lot of injury adversity that year. Garoppolo was playing hurt for a big chunk of it. They were planning to use Trey Lance, but then he broke his thumb early on. They were down to Tom Compton at right tackle for half the season. They didn't have a running back in that season because they did, but Elijah Mitchell started to get beat up. I think he had 6 injuries, so they had to put Deebo Samuel in there to take the load off of him. My point is they had to schematically work their asses off in 2021 to field the offense they did, and it was the number 4 offense in football. And I think that a lot of that credit went to the fact that they had a staff there, and Mike McDaniel ended up being hired by the Dolphins. They don't just hand out these promotions like candy, as evidenced by the fact that was the only time that they've had a named OC. And Shanahan feels that Kubiak is in that at that level now. So, and they're going to need that type of performance from the coaching staff to bounce back from a year where they were low in play caller rating, which is, inherently subjective. It's tough to gauge, right? But Shanahan had normally rated number 1, number 2, and number 3. This year he was like number 18. So there's a lot to fix. And I think that the Kubiak promotion is a sign that they might be heading in the right direction.
And it's a sign that you think you need to do something to keep him potentially. Yeah. Right. So you let him do some, he's going to do some press conferences, and you're helping him become a head coach or a real play caller somewhere else, maybe. So that's good. It'll be another guy you have to replace.
Yeah.
Maybe Mike McDaniel's not the coach of the Dolphins at that point. I don't know. Kyle hasn't had his tree long enough to see if coaches will come back to him yet, like they did with Belichick. Now, a lot of Belichick guys failed quickly and then came back. Not all.
Well, and that's that. I guess that's a good way to wrap it up. That's a full circle moment. Robert Saleh. We'll see if he's the next 49ers defensive coordinator.
Yeah. He'd be the first member of the tree to come back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he would. That would bring it back to 2017 to 2020. All right, man. That was good.
Good work, Tyler Warren.
Hour 43. We put in work.
Full
That's
day.
the longest show I've ever done. I've never gone more than an hour and 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is OG podcasting from my world. Now you just do like 8-minute clips, But
yeah, now it's a lot quicker. But I think that the roster deserved one. It was fun to talk about it with you, and we'll do it again at some point here in the couple coming months.
All right, David. Good seeing you, man.
You too, man. We'll see you soon.